What hides in the silence of old libraries and on the pages of yellowed bestiaries? Within them, the shadows of the past come to life. Stories of a witcher on the trail, a sorceress weaving her spells, a bard whose ballads are remembered for centuries, and a child of surprise running along the threads of destiny. Write in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you now. And now, make yourself comfortable. Breathe in the scent of old books and a fire crackling in the hearth. We begin. Do you know what the most dangerous thing in the world of monsters is? It's not their inhuman strength, not their razor-sharp claws or deadly teeth, not ancient terrifying magic or inconceivable, sophisticated cunning capable of driving any mortal mad. No, the most dangerous thing is your own ignorance, your absolute unpreparedness for an encounter with the unimaginable, with what lies beyond understanding, with the otherworldly. It is this that makes you vulnerable in the face of an unknown threat. It is this that turns a whisper in the forest, which could simply be the play of the wind, into an unequivocal, deadly verdict. It is this that transforms a seemingly harmless path through a swampy bog or a forgotten graveyard into a journey to inevitable, often agonizing death. And no one in this cruel and unpredictable world understands this simple, yet harsh and merciless truth better than a witcher. For him, knowledge is not merely theoretical power or academic curiosity. It is an absolute, vital necessity, literally survival in a world that forgives not even the slightest mistake, a world that offers no second chances. It is the thin, yet strong line between returning from a successfully completed contract with a heavy purse full of ducats and forever becoming part of the wilderness, turning into fertilizer for forest mushrooms, becoming another nameless, unfortunate victim whom no one will ever remember. The road to this unassuming inn was long, grueling, and incredibly dusty. It snaked between vast, boundless fields where the harvest had recently been gathered, leaving behind only withered stubble, and then plunged into a shadowy, ancient forest. Here, the air was particularly heavy, thick with the scent of damp leaves, wet earth, and pine needles, mingled with the coolness brought from the swamps. The sun had long been setting, painting the endless sky in crimson, orange, and violet tones, casting its last reflections on the horizon, when Geralt, tired after several days in the saddle following another contract, finally saw a thin wisp of smoke lazily rising above the roofs of a small village. A tiny, unremarkable village, as if forgotten by God, somewhere deep in Temeria, or perhaps lost among the hills and bogs of Velen, barely marked on even the most detailed maps. There were no luxurious castles here, no glittering mints, or bustling, crowded marketplaces. Only a simple, unhurried life, simple people tired from work, and, in all likelihood, very simple, yet no less dangerous problems they had to face. But it was here, in the very heart of this rural simplicity, that the inn lay hidden. Not a noisy, boisterous, cheerful tavern where lutes play recklessly until morning and fists fly for any reason. No, this one was quiet, almost forgotten by God and men, seemingly hidden from the entire world, like an old, wise beast, thoroughly saturated with the smell of old, time-darkened wood and a light, barely perceptible, yet pervasive sadness inherent in all forgotten places. Evening had long and finally descended upon the land, and the last, fleeting rays of the setting sun, piercing through the small, dusty windows, had long given way to deep, velvety shadows that lurked in the corners like living, cautious creatures. These shadows stretched and distorted, transforming ordinary objects into something mysterious and enigmatic. Inside, in the furthest, almost unnoticeable, yet surprisingly cozy corner, as if specially created for solitude, at a crooked, heavy oak table that seemed to have witnessed generations of patrons and centuries of time, sat Geralt of Rivia. His usually focused, slightly frowning, sometimes even stern face was now surprisingly relaxed, but his eyes remained sharp and penetrating, attentive to the slightest details, though they looked not into the distance, nor at other patrons, but down, at the open, worn book lying before him. His silver hair, usually tied back, now cascaded over his shoulders, shimmering in the candlelight. Here it was, the Bestiary. It's not just a book. It's a veritable treasure trove of knowledge, a chronicle of survival. Not a glossy, richly adorned volume with gold and precious stones from a royal library, intended for the idle reading of pampered aristocrats, but a worn, time-beaten, yet no less valuable, faithful companion of many years and many dangerous adventures. Its cover, once likely made of sturdy, tanned leather, was now almost completely worn away, exposing dark, rough fibers, like old, barely healed wounds. The corners were frayed to threads, the edges bent, and the surface bore countless marks from cuts, deep scratches, and perhaps even dents from blows received in the heat of battle. Each such mark was not just a defect, it was a scar, telling its own unique story. The pages had yellowed with time, with dampness, with countless touches of dirty, blood-stained or mud-stained fingers from spilled beer, water, and, undoubtedly, from bloodstains, once bright, now brownish, almost indiscernible. In places, they were stuck together. Elsewhere, traces of dried plants, gathered for potions, or perhaps fragments of flesh from a long-slain monster, whose image or description had been so carefully studied and analyzed, were imprinted. This was not just a book. It was a chronicle of survival, a true map of a world full of unimaginable dangers, encrypted in words and drawings. Every rustle of its pages was a silent story. Every stain a mute reminder of the past, of overcome trials, of victories and defeats. It was not just dry information. It was living experience, gathered bit by bit, reinterpreted and recorded. On the table before him rested a heavy pewter mug, half emptied, with the remnants of dark, fragrant, tart ale, a thin layer of cool condensation slowly trickling down its sides. Nearby, a small, broken piece of charcoal, most likely picked from the hearth, with which Geralt made neat, almost imperceptible, yet very precise notes in the margins, highlighting important details or adding his own observations made in the field. A candle, set in a heavy cast-iron candlestick with intricate patterns forged by a long-forgotten smith, cast a soft, warm, dancing light on the pages, making the letters and engravings come alive, sinking into shadow, then reappearing like ghosts from the past. The flame flickered with the slightest draft that seeped through invisible cracks in the walls, from the witcher's barely perceptible breath, from the movement of air, creating whimsical, moving shadows that danced across the wooden, roughly hewn walls, across the low ceiling, and across the witcher's focused face. These shadows made his figure even more mysterious, as if he himself were part of an ancient, barely discernible mystery hidden in the depths of centuries, waiting for its moment to be revealed. The warm candlelight created a kind of cocoon around him, shielding him from the outside world, from the inn's hustle and bustle, creating an island of concentration. The scent. Oh, the scent. It penetrated deep into the nostrils, enveloping the consciousness like an invisible but palpable cloud, carrying one away from the turmoil and anxieties of the outside world. It was a complex, multi-layered symphony of aromas. First and foremost, the smell of old paper, yellowed and brittle with time. The smell of dry ink, long absorbed into the fibers. The smell of dried herbs that perhaps once lay between these pages, leaving their delicate, almost ethereal trace. It mingled with a thick, warm, resinous aroma of wood smoke rising from the huge, wild stone hearth located right in the center of the hall, where embers glimmered. The smoke was not acrid, not sharp, not irritating to the eyes, but soft, enveloping, smelling of forest, resin, warmth, comfort, and ancient memories. Added to this was a light, barely noticeable, but so characteristic smell of dampness, speaking of the proximity of a river flowing somewhere nearby, or simply of a long, rainy, raw autumn night that had lasted for several days. And of course, the ubiquitous, pervasive smell of ale, tart, malty, heavy, with a slight sourness and notes of fermentation. Sometimes, a faint aroma of meat stew, simmering in a large cauldron over the hearth, or freshly baked bread, added to this bouquet, giving the sense of coziness even greater depth. All of this together created an astonishing, rich symphony of aromas that enveloped Geralt, carrying him from the real, tangible world into a world of words and images, into the world of his endless memories, warnings, and anticipations. The sounds. They are here, constantly present all around, yet they are distant, muffled, as if passing through thick fabric, through the inn's stout walls. It's not a distracting noise, not an irritating hum, but rather a background accompaniment that doesn't hinder concentration. On the contrary, it complements the atmosphere, making it vivid, voluminous, and more real. The muffled murmur of other patrons' voices, peasants returning from hard work in the fields, itinerant merchants seeking lodging and a good deal, perhaps a rare soldier on leave or assignment, telling war stories. Their conversations are indistinct. They merge into a single, indiscernible drone, like a distant beehive buzzing somewhere at the edge of the forest. Close, yet safe. From time to time, there's the clinking of mugs striking each other in greeting, during a toast, or simply from a clumsy movement, or a dull thud as someone sets them down on the heavy wooden table with casual confidence. The creak of old floorboards beneath someone's careful, or, conversely, unhurried steps. A light, restrained laugh. A quiet cough, or a sigh of weariness. Somewhere in a distant corner, perhaps an old, gray-haired fiddler quietly plays a simple, almost melancholic tune, barely audible, like the whisper of wind in dry leaves. And from the huge, stone-built hearth comes the rhythmic, soothing crackle of embers, low, almost meditative, capable of lulling one to sleep, of drowning out anxious thoughts. Sometimes from outside, through the thick walls, comes the howl of the wind, or the quiet patter of raindrops on the roof, only emphasizing the warmth and dryness within. This is the sound of life, the sound of warmth, the sound of relative safety, something so often lacking in the Witcher's harsh and dangerous world, where every rustle, every crack of a branch can mean the approach of death, lurking in the darkness. Geralt is engrossed in his reading, absorbing every word, every detail. His finger, covered with old scars, glides along the lines, tracing each letter, each mark, as if trying to feel them physically. Sometimes he pauses at an engraving, executed with a rough but expressive stroke, depicting another monster, a griffin with its sharp, deadly claws and a beak capable of splitting armor. a ghoul with its eternal, insatiable thirst for flesh and blood, or perhaps some lesser-known, yet no less dangerous forest spirit, about which frightening but often true legends are told. He doesn't just read, he studies, analyzes, deconstructs the information. Every word is absorbed, analyzed, and compared with existing experience. Where does this creature live? In swamps? Mountains? Underground? What does it feed on? Human flesh, carrion, fear. What are its habits and behaviors? When is it most dangerous? What are its weaknesses that can be exploited to gain the upper hand? Which signs will help defeat it, and which will be completely useless, simply wasting energy? Which potions will be most effective, and which will only waste precious, rare ingredients? He makes notes, sometimes sketching a small symbol, a movement diagram, or an arrow in the margins, pointing out particularly important moments, or adding his own, practice-proven clarifications. The scrape of charcoal on the rough, porous paper, a quiet, almost intimate, yet so distinct sound, the sound of a moving thought, the sound of the learning process, the sound of slow but sure preparation for the future, for the inevitable confrontation. It is the sound of a man constantly learning and adapting. Occasionally, he looks away, not completely from the book, no, just for a fraction of a second. He simply lifts his head to rest his eyes from the small, faded print, or to momentarily catch the distant, flickering gleam of the flame in the hearth, dancing, alive. In these moments, his gaze seems distant, as if he is mentally replaying the scenario of a future battle, step by detailed step, applying the newly acquired knowledge, imagining how he will move, what sign to use, when to deliver the decisive blow. He imagines the smell of sulfur, the sound of tearing flesh, the weight of the sword in his hand. Or perhaps he is recalling the past, encountering in his memory the monster he is currently reading about. He remembers the piercing shriek, the smell of sulfur or decay, the weight of the sword in his hand, the sensation of warm, sticky blood on the blade, the throbbing pain of a wound. These brief pauses are not a distraction from his work, but rather an integral, essential part of it. It is a process of assimilation, of integrating new information with accumulated experience, a process of transforming theory into readiness for action. The world beyond the inn's walls is cold, dark, unforgiving, full of countless dangers lurking at every turn, in every shadow. But here, in this tiny, cozy corner of warmth and light, amidst the smells of smoke and ale, Geralt finds not just a temporary refuge from the weather, but a true, deep sanctuary. Not only for his tired body, which needs rest, but also for his ever-alert mind, which never stops working. Here he can organize his knowledge, refresh his memory, prepare for tomorrow, for a new encounter with the unknown, for a new, inevitable trial. The Bestiary is not just a book. It is his shield, his faithful weapon, his guiding star in this unpredictable, cruel world. It is an extension of himself, his memory, his experience, his instincts. The hours slowly, almost imperceptibly, yet relentlessly tick by. The candle burns down, growing shorter and shorter, casting ever longer and more dramatic shadows that stretch and distort, transforming familiar objects into bizarre, phantasmagorical silhouettes on the walls. The hum in the inn gradually subsides. Voices grow quieter, laughter fades, music dies away, leaving only faint, fading chords. Someone leaves, bidding farewell to the innkeeper and wishing good night. Someone prepares for sleep, curled up on a bench by the wall, wrapped in their old, worn cloak to keep warm. But Geralt still sits, motionless as an ancient statue, as if rooted to this table. His figure almost completely merges with the shadows. Only the light from the candle, now very low, brightly illuminates his face and the open book, turning him into a living, breathing painting, frozen in time. He does not rush, for knowledge does not tolerate haste, does not tolerate hurriedness, does not tolerate superficiality. It demands patience, attention, deep immersion, an almost meditative state, a complete merging with the subject of study. And when, at last, the final drop of wax slowly trickles down the candlestick and solidifies, and the flame flickers one last time, emitting a brief blue tongue, then dies, plunging the corner into near-complete darkness, the Witcher carefully, with a soft, almost inaudible sigh, closes the bestiary. With a faint rustle, as if the book itself sighs from a completed task, from its wisdom having been used and understood once more. Its pages cling together, promising to keep their secrets until next time. He rises, his movements slow, but full of hidden strength and purpose. Every movement is deliberate. The world outside awaits him, cold and full of dangers, monsters and men no less dangerous. But now, Geralt is ready for it, ready for dawn, for a new road, for a new battle. Because tonight, in this quiet corner of the inn, he wasn't just reading old pages. He wasn't just studying the habits of monsters. He was learning to survive, honing his skills, accumulating invaluable experience that will one day surely save his life, or the lives of those he chooses to protect. It was an evening not of hustle and meaningless pastime, but of deep tranquility, filled with meaning, an evening that made him stronger. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the quiet moments of a Witcher's life, please hit the like button, subscribe for more stories, and let me know in the comments what other aspects of their world you'd like to explore. Have you ever wondered where the greatest poets find their inspiration when their own muses fall silent, hidden behind the mists of everyday life and the frantic chase for new experiences? When rhymes slip away like misty specters at dawn, and words feel flat, gray, and lifeless, stripped of all spark, where does one go who lives solely for art, who breathes melody and exhales poetry? Our old, and dare I say, universally beloved friend, Jaskier, that restless minstrel and bard, seems to have found his own time-tested answer to this eternal question. On days like these, when even the most enchanting social balls, full of ringing laughter and playful glances, lose their usual, intoxicating charm, when even the most desperate and whimsical adventures, experienced side by side with his taciturn Witcher, leave no cherished, alluring aftertaste capable of igniting a new poetic star, he seeks refuge. And he finds it where time flows differently, where every breath is imbued with the invisible wisdom of countless ages, where every corner holds echoes of long past events, in the majestic, truly boundless Oxenfurt Library. Picture this day, like a painting on a canvas of calm. The sun, since early morning, had already risen high above the tiled roofs of the university town, bathing them in golden light. But deep within the library's ancient walls, its timid rays were only just beginning to pierce through the tall, pointed Gothic windows. The air inside was cool and still, as if preserved in amber, completely unlike the bustling energy of the streets outside. Jaskier stepped inside, as if diving into another dimension, a completely different world, where the laws of ordinary reality seemed fluid. The massive oak door behind him closed silently, as if an invisible hand guided it on velvet hinges. swallowing the street's clamor, the rumble of carts, the shouts of merchants, and the distant laughter of students. It left him embraced by a profound, truly scholarly silence. This dense, hushed shroud enveloped everything, like an invisible blanket, broken only by the barely perceptible, distant creak of old wooden floors under cautious, almost ghostly footsteps, or the faint, gentle rustle of a turning parchment page. This wasn't the kind of silence that presses down on consciousness, creating a feeling of emptiness and solitude. Rather, it was one that gently invites, embraces like a soft blanket, and soothes the soul's turbulent impulses. A silence where every, even the most insignificant, barely audible rustle seemed like a grand event, and every unspoken thought, a long echo, wandering in the vast, seemingly empty, yet in reality, brim-filled hall. And immediately, even before his eyes adjusted to the noble dimness beneath the high arches, Jaskier's nose caught that unique, painfully familiar scent, the smell of old books. It wasn't just a smell. It was an entire symphony of aromas, complex and multifaceted, telling its own silent story. Here mingled the thick, sweetish, and slightly dusty essence of ancient parchment, the sharp, almost animalistic scent of tanned leather bindings, the bitter, pungent notes of centuries-dried ink, and the faint but distinct warm aroma of beeswax, once meticulously used to treat the massive wooden shelves and perhaps even the pages of some especially valuable editions for their preservation. It was the scent of knowledge absorbed by thousands of hands, the scent of time stretched into infinity, the scent of countless stories woven together by invisible threads. Jaskier inhaled it deeply, greedily, as if tasting a rare, aged wine, and felt the tension accumulated during days of fruitless creative searches slowly, almost miraculously, recede, dissolving into the air. His gaze slowly swept across the endless rows. Before him lay a forest of books, infinite shelves of dark wood, blackened by time and touch, stretched far upwards, almost to the very ceilings, disappearing into the majestic gloom beneath vaulted Gothic arches. Books. Thousands. No, tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands of books. From thin, weightless parchment scrolls, inscribed with tiny, calligraphic script, neatly tied with faded ribbons, to massive, iron-bound tomes that seemed capable of effortlessly holding the secrets of entire, long-vanished civilizations and forgotten worlds. Some were artfully adorned with ornate gold embossing and vibrant, colorful miniatures that shimmered in the light. Others, conversely, were plain and unassuming at first glance, yet in their modest, almost humble appearance lay their own, no less captivating mystery, a promise of profound content. Jaskier moved forward, his steps on the old, sometimes creaking wooden floor, as silent, almost reverent, as the silence that reigned around him. He walked between the rows, as if among ancient mighty trees in an enchanted wise forest where each tree was a tome. His fingers barely brushed the rough spines, feeling their varied textures, the softness of tanned leather, the coarseness of homespun linen, or the surprising smoothness of wood polished by time. Each spine seemed to whisper its own unique story, inviting him to open it and plunge into the world hidden between the pages, a world created by someone's mind and heart. This wasn't just a repository of information, it was a true portal to the past, a direct path into the minds of those who lived, loved, suffered, fought, and created long before him, long before his birth, before his era. He wasn't looking for anything specific. His goal today was far more abstract, intangible, to find a spark, to rekindle the fading flame of inspiration that seemed to have eluded him lately. He wandered, allowing his intuition, that subtle inner compass, to guide him. Here was a heavy, dusty treatise on astronomy, with yellowed, hand-drawn diagrams of the starry sky, where each star looked like a small, dulled pearl. There was an ancient collection of herbal remedies, its pages covered with countless marginalia, perhaps made hundreds of years ago by the trembling hand of some monk healer. And here, a whimsical book on etiquette, with amusing and utterly outdated advice for courtiers, long since unobserved, exuding a naive spontaneity. Each volume was a separate, self-contained world, a life captured and sealed on parchment. Finally, his gaze fell upon a completely unassuming, yet surprisingly elegant volume, bound in dark red, almost burgundy leather. The leather was soft to the touch, like velvet, yet remarkably durable. There were no loud, prominent titles on the spine, just a few ornate, almost unreadable letters that Jaskier couldn't immediately decipher. But something about this book, something barely perceptible, like a whisper of wind, gently called to him. Perhaps it was that inexplicable energy true artists feel when something special, something meant just for them, appears before them. He carefully withdrew the volume from the shelf. The wooden shelf creaked under its weight, making a sound that, in the surrounding silence, seemed unusually loud and even a little bold. Opening the book, Jaskier gently turned a few pages. The parchment was thick, slightly rough to the touch, with a light, warm, creamy tint, like cream itself. The ink was noticeably faded, but the handwriting, incredibly elegant and neat, bearing witness to the ancient scribe's mastery. It was, as it turned out, a collection of forgotten ballads and tales written in Old Redanian, which Jaskier, to his great delight and undeniable pleasure, understood quite well. Many of them spoke of unhappy and happy love, of bitter losses, of incredible valor and vile betrayal, of heroes forgotten by time. The words flowed smoothly, like a crystal mountain stream, awakening something long forgotten within his soul, something that seemed lost forever. He found a small, comfortable table by one of the tall windows, where the brightest and most vibrant sunbeams penetrated. They pierced the dense air like golden arrows, and in their light, myriads of dust motes danced clearly, tiny, almost invisible particles of time, suspended in the air as if in an eternal dance. Jaskier settled onto an old wooden chair, which softly creaked under his weight, as if welcoming him, like an old friend. The book rested gently on the cool surface of the table. He ran his fingers over the delicate, elegant illustrations, ancient engravings depicting mighty knights in shining armor, beautiful ladies with long hair, mystical dragons soaring in the sky, and mysterious, enchanted forests. Every detail was drawn with incredible meticulousness and love, exuding the spirit of long-past, noble eras when the world seemed simpler and more heroic. Jaskier plunged headfirst into reading. He read, reread the same stanzas, absorbing every word, every metaphor, every turn of phrase, like a sponge soaking up water. He felt foreign thoughts, foreign images, foreign emotions penetrate his consciousness, mingling with his own, creating new, astonishing, and unexpected combinations from which entirely new creations could be born. In the deep, almost absolute silence of the library, only the faint, barely perceptible rustle of turning pages could be heard. Time lost its usual familiar flow. Minutes merged into hours, hours into an endless, boundless current, and he, Jaskier dissolved into this current, becoming a part of the great repository. Jaskier made notes in his small but trusty notebook, which he always carried with him, just like his lute. His pen, thin and elegant, lightly scratched across the thick paper, leaving neat, inky flourishes that would soon become the beginning of new ballads. This scratching was almost a meditative, rhythmic sound that harmoniously blended into the overall majestic symphony of silence, complementing it and making it even more complete. He copied particularly liked stanzas, noted unusual turns of phrase, sketched quick ideas for new melodies, even tiny scenes for plays. His head was full of sounds, not real ones, but those born in his imagination from reading ancient texts. He heard the gentle chime of harps at royal balls, the passionate whispers of lovers under the moon, the furious roar of battle, the lament for lost friends, the clash of blades, and the groans of the dying. The sunbeams piercing through the tall windows gradually changed their angle, like an artist altering a palette, coloring the suspended dust in soft, golden, then orange, and finally crimson hues. The light fell directly onto his open pages, illuminating the ancient script and his own fresh notes, as if pointing to the connection between past and present. Jaskier lifted his head, pulling himself away from the book, his gaze slightly blurred from prolonged reading, but a bright, unquenchable spark of newly found inspiration glowed in his eyes. He looked at the world outside the window, at Oxenfurt's neat tiled roofs, at the distant fog-covered fields, at the clear, cloudless autumn sky. And this world now seemed completely different to him, deeper, more multifaceted, full of invisible connections and meanings. He understood that sometimes, to create something truly new, truly grand, one doesn't need to frantically chase adventures, seek out loud events, or plunge into a whirlwind of passions, but simply to stop, slow down, listen to the quiet, almost silent whisper of the past, and allow it to penetrate deep into the soul, filling it to the brim. His hand involuntarily reached for his lute, lying beside him on the floor, as if it too sensed this surge of creative energy. But no, today was not the time for ringing songs. Today was a time for deep, thoughtful silence, for contemplation, for internal work. He allowed the words, images, and melodies to settle in his mind, like that golden dust settling on ancient tomes. But this dust was not dead, not lifeless, but alive, capable of yielding powerful, vibrant sprouts of something beautiful, something new and exciting. He closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling that unique, cell-deep familiar aroma, the smell of the library, the smell of knowledge, the smell of inspiration. A pleasant, healing warmth spread through his chest, warming him from within. Melodies that had seemed elusive, like fish in a stream, now begged to emerge, forming harmonious chords. Words he couldn't find now formed elegant rhymes, shaping impeccable stanzas. He had spent not just an hour here, but perhaps an entire morning, or even half the day, or more. Time had truly lost its meaning and dissolved in this sanctuary of wisdom. When he finally pulled himself away from reading, his back was a little stiff from prolonged sitting, but an astonishing lightness and crystal clarity reigned in his soul, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. He carefully closed the old volume, feeling its solid, pleasant weight in his hands. It wasn't just a book. It was a true vessel of ancient concentrated wisdom that had generously shared its priceless contents. He slowly stood up, placing the notebook with his new notes and sketches into his pocket. feeling it filled with fresh ideas. Returning to the shelf to replace the book in its rightful place, Jasquier lingered for another moment, slowly, reverently, surveying this silent, yet astonishingly vibrant world where every object seemed animated. Every volume on the shelf, every parchment scroll, every fragment of parchment inscribed by someone's hand was not merely an object, but part of a vast, continuous dialogue, lasting for centuries, transcending epochs and generations. This was a place where departed voices regained their strength, where ideas never vanished, but merely awaited their moment to be discovered, reinterpreted, and to resound again in unison with the present. Before finally leaving the library, he once again surveyed the high, majestic hall, filled with magical, dusty beams of light. He felt a deep, sincere gratitude, not only towards the wise men and nameless scribes whose invaluable works were preserved here, but also towards the library itself, which, like an old, kind nanny or a wise mentor, had sheltered him from the world's hustle and bustle, from its insistent demands, and had given him precisely what he had sought so long and unsuccessfully. This time, he didn't emerge with a song already written or a poem fully completed, but with something far more valuable, tiny but potent seeds that would surely sprout and yield lush, fragrant fruits. New, unformed melodies already resonated in his head. Fresh, vibrant images were being born, and he knew that now, with the internal barrier broken, words themselves would find their way to his pen, like a river flowing towards the sea. The dense, multi-layered scent of old books, mingled with the warm aroma of beeswax, remained etched in his memory forever, an indelible reminder of where true inspiration can be found, not in noisy, smoke-filled taverns, nor on dusty, perilous, endless roads, but in deep, thoughtful silence, where every page whispers stories of bygone eras, and every beam of light illuminates the path to new, unprecedented discoveries. And as long as places like the Oxenfurt Library exist, poets like Jasquier will never be without words. Their muses will never fall silent. He stepped out onto the street, and the bright sunlight, contrasting with the dimness of the knowledge repository, momentarily blinded him. But this time, he felt no familiar dissonance between his inner and outer worlds. The outside world now seemed merely a natural continuation of the profound, rich inner world he had just discovered among the ancient tomes. His steps were light, as if he floated above the ground, and a faint but genuine smile played on his lips. The day, it seemed, was only just beginning, and it was filled with inexhaustible potential for creation, for new ballads, for new adventures. If this journey into the Oxenfurt Library sparked something in you, hit that like button. Share your own secret spots for inspiration in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next adventure. Do you know what true mystery sounds like? Not the whispers of conspirators in a dark corner, not the scratch of an old quill writing forbidden knowledge, but something far deeper, far more encompassing. True mystery sounds like absolute silence. It sounds like the silent lapping of water against the sides of a boat in a thick, impenetrable fog, where the world around you shrinks to the sound of your own heartbeat. Today, we will immerse ourselves in precisely that kind of silence, becoming invisible witnesses to a moment when space itself becomes an accomplice to a great secret, when every sound, every shadow has its own weight and purpose. We will journey to a secret conclave where no invitations are sent, no notifications dispatched. People don't come there. They arrive, one by one, in deep, palpable silence. And so, upon the ink-black surface, Barely reflecting the last echoes of the dying day, a silhouette appears. It is not a ship, nor a barge, but merely a small, simple boat. Its dark, weathered sides almost blending with the velvet blackness of the water. It seems like a phantom, gliding across the surface without a single ripple, without visible effort. At its stern, standing tall, is she, the one whose name evokes respect and dread in the highest circles of the world of magic and power. Yennefer. Her silhouette stands out sharply against the gradually deepening gloom, as if carved from obsidian. Her raven-black hair falls freely to her shoulders, barely touching the collar of her travel cloak, drawn tightly around her to ward off the increasing, penetrating dampness. Her face, despite the fatigue of a long journey, retains its characteristic sharp features, and her gaze, like a searchlight, is fixed forward, piercing the encroaching veil of invisibility. She uses no oars, nor does the boat have a mast with a sail that could catch even a ghostly breeze. No, her power is far deeper, far more subtle. It requires no crude mortal instruments. Around the boat, barely perceptible, as if space itself trembles slightly, the water ripples invisibly. These are not waves created by the vessel's movement, nor a current. This is a pulsation, as if the very air, the very water, even the very fabric of reality obey a subtle yet undeniable will emanating from this woman. Soft, almost invisible, silver-violet threads of magic, barely discernible even to a trained eye, stretch from her delicate hands, enveloping the boat's hull. They gently, yet incredibly surely, propel it forward, leaving no discernible trace on the water, only a faint, fleeting disturbance on the surface, which is immediately swallowed by the encroaching darkness. This is not a display of devastating force, not a fireworks display of sparkling spells capable of shattering fortresses. No, this is the highest art of magic, a silent whisper, a soundless touch to the very essence of the element, the ability not to compel, but to persuade, to guide. The boat glides, almost not touching the water, its movement seeming unearthly, as if it floats on air, not on waves. The air around becomes tangibly heavier, cooler, with each passing minute. One feels not just dampness, but a thick fog, penetrating the lungs, catching in the throat. At first, it was just a light, ghostly mist on the very horizon, a promise of the unseen. But now it envelops everything, shrouding the boat like a dense, soft pall. The world shrinks to a few meters around, swallowing the sky, the water, even the distant silhouettes of shores, if they were ever visible beyond this impenetrable wall. The silence becomes absolute, almost oppressive. The only sound that penetrates this thickness of stillness is the rhythmic, monotonous lapping of water against the boat's sides. This is not the roar of waves, not a furious surf, but almost a whisper, thin, repetitive, both calming and unsettling. Shh, shh, shh. The water speaks. The fog speaks. And they speak only of silence, of its boundless power, of how it absorbs all other sounds, leaving only the echo of its own existence. The feeling of isolation becomes almost physical, as if Yennefer has found herself in an endless white nothingness, where there is no direction, no time, no other living beings, only she and her unyielding purpose. Yennefer stands motionless, frozen in the center of this world of silence. For a moment, her eyes close, as if she plunges deep within herself, tuning into invisible waves. Then they open again, focused, piercing, as if capable of seeing through the flesh of the world. She does not search for landmarks on the water with her eyes. Nor does she strain her vision, trying to discern shadows in the fog. She feels them, feels the cold, damp breath of the land that inexorably approaches, like an ancient monster rising from the ocean depths. Feels the faint but distinct ancient energies emanating from the island, like a mysterious, magical beacon in this boundless, white, formless nothingness. Her magic no longer just pushes the boat. It interacts with the fog, gently, almost imperceptibly, parting before her, creating a narrow, ephemeral corridor through which the boat glides towards its destination. It is like a passage through the very fabric of reality, accessible only to the chosen, only to those who can read signs that are written on no scroll, spoken by no voice, but only felt at the edge of perception. The air around the boat seems slightly thinner for a moment, as if the fog respectfully parts, opening the way. There it is. Ahead, something different from just a solid wall of fog. First, just a shadow, a dark, irregular blotch in the milky shroud. Then, a blurred, rough, and uneven outline that could not possibly belong to a natural landscape. And finally, as if from the depths of time itself, from the very heart of the fog, slowly, with dignity, outlines emerge. Ruins, ancient, covered in thick, rich, centuries-old ivy that seems to have grown into their stone hearts, becoming an inseparable part, their green skin. They do not look fallen, destroyed by force or time. Rather, they are sleeping. Sleeping giants, their massive, age-darkened walls, semi-ruined, but still proudly towering arches and skeletal remains of majestic towers, reaching into nothingness, whisper of long-forgotten vanished times, of power that once reigned here. Moss covers every cracked stone in a thick layer, giving them a soft, muted deep green hue that strangely softens their austere, monumental power, making them almost part of the forest that has grown around them. This place breathes antiquity. The fog here does not disperse. No, it only becomes slightly lighter, more transparent, allowing details to be seen, but it does not leave, continuing to fulfill its role as guardian of the mystery. Some sections of the walls seem never to have seen bright sunlight, always hidden in this eternal damp veil. At the very foot of the ruins, directly out of the dark water, protrude the decayed remains of wooden docks, gray, slippery, some barely holding on, others almost completely consumed by the elements and seaweed. But among them, there is one that is sturdier, better maintained, its wooden planks not as covered in mold, as if it merely awaits its hour, awaits the one who will arrive. Towards it, Yennefer directs herself. The boat gently, almost soundlessly, touches the slippery wood, leaving not even a faint bump behind, only a very light, barely audible creak of an old rope pulled taut to a post, disturbing the absolute, almost sacred silence of the island. Yennefer steps onto the wet stone of the pier. Her tread is light, confident, almost weightless, as if she doesn't touch the surface but floats above it. Her foot does not slip on the wet, slick moss. She is as if part of this place, its guest who knows its every secret, every curve of its ancient soul. She breathes deeply, filling her lungs, sensing the layered smell of damp earth, ancient, weathered stone, salty seaweed, and something else, elusive but deeply familiar to a person of her abilities. The scent of stagnant, yet not extinguished magic that has permeated every atom of this place, merging with its flesh. She turns around. The boat, now empty, is barely visible in the thick fog, its outlines dissolving as if it had never been there, as if it were merely a mirage evoked by the mystery itself. This place is outside time, outside the mundane, beyond the understanding of most. She walks along a narrow, barely discernible path, winding through the labyrinth of ruins. The path is not paved. It is rather a way trodden over centuries, marked only by a slightly less dense layer of moss and a few broken, half-buried stones. On both sides, the remains of walls, once majestic, now only shadows of their former glory, covered with carvings that have long worn away, becoming unreadable, but still retaining echoes of long-gone symbols. Ancient knowledge, long-forgotten religions press in on her. Every tree, every bush here seems incredibly ancient, entwined with thick vines, with branches bent into strange, almost eerie shapes, as if they themselves are part of these ruined structures, their living, writhing skeletons. Through the fog, passages into the depths of the ruins are visible, dark chasms, beckoning into the unknown, promising to reveal secrets or bury them forever. Yennefer does not linger, does not explore these tempting dark passages. She knows where she is going. The purpose of her arrival is not the study of antiquity, not archaeological research, but something far more important, far more urgent, a meeting. She reaches a small but surprisingly spacious clearing, surrounded on all sides by high, semi-ruined walls that once, likely, were part of a large courtyard or temple complex. Here, in the middle, rises what was once, probably, an altar or a pedestal. It is massive, carved from dark, volcanic stone, its surface smooth, though covered with a thin, glistening layer of moisture, as if constantly weeping from its own ancientness. Around it are several large boulders, weathered by time, covered with moss. They once served as primitive but sturdy seats for those who came here before her. This is the meeting place. There are no chairs, no tables, no usual attributes of conference rooms, only stone, fog, and absolute impenetrable silence. She stops. She does not sit. She simply stands, inhaling the cool, damp air that feels so clean it burns her lungs. Her gaze is once again fixed forward, but now it does not seek a path or landmarks. It waits for others. Like her, the chosen ones. Those who possess enough power and influence to be summoned to this forgotten place. Those who know of this island's existence, its purpose, the importance of what is about to happen here. The fog around does not dissipate. On the contrary, it seems to thicken, forming an invisible but tangible wall around the clearing, enclosing it in a dense, isolated cocoon. This is not just a natural phenomenon. This is a barrier created by the very energy of this place, or perhaps by ancient powerful magic that guards it from curious eyes, from unwelcome visitors, from anyone who should not know of its existence. The silence on the island is absolute. Here, there are no joyful bird calls, no gentle rustling of wind in the branches, not even the buzzing of insects. Only the light, almost imperceptible rustle of drops running down the thick, enveloping ivy, and a very, very distant, almost ghostly lapping of water, that probably the endless, mighty ocean continues its monotonous breathing somewhere beyond this boundless veil of fog. This sound, so faint, barely discernible, only emphasizes the depth and density of the silence around, making it almost deafening. Yennefer does not move. She does not take out her amulet, does not check her weapons, if she has any, though her demeanor makes it clear she is always ready. No need. In this place, her only and most reliable protection is her own strength, her sharp mind, her deep knowledge of the laws of this world and its invisible energies. She trusts them completely. Her thoughts, no doubt, flow slowly, silently, like ghostly streams beneath the surface of the earth. What is she thinking about in these moments of absolute isolation? About the upcoming meeting, its goals, its consequences? About the reasons she was summoned? About the fates that will be decided here, in this lost, forgotten corner of the world? Or perhaps about something more personal, about what brought her here, to this voluntary isolation, when the whole world holds its breath in anticipation of something inevitable, something that will change everything? Her face expresses no hint of fear, no sign of worry, only a deep, almost melancholic tranquility. The tranquility of a person who has seen too much to be surprised and endured too much to be afraid, who has accepted her destiny and is ready to carry her cross. The damp air does not just nip at the skin, it seems to envelop her, becoming part of her, penetrating every cell. She closes her eyes, listening, not with her ears, but with her entire being, every pore of her skin, every thread of her magical essence, listening to the silence, listening to the pulsation of magic that fills every stone of these ruins, every leaf of ivy, every drop of moisture. Here, in this forgotten place, energy vibrates like a living, sleeping, yet ready to awaken at the first sign, creature. This is a place of power, a place of ancient knowledge, where for centuries, great minds and powerful sorcerers have flocked. It is no wonder that precisely here, in this mystical solitude, this secret conclave was decided to be held. Only here will words carry true weight, and decisions will have real, undeniable, world-changing power. Time seemed to dissolve in the fog, cease to exist. Minutes, hours, they lose their meaning when there is no sun, no landmarks, no usual course of things. There is only fog, ancient ruins, and anticipation. Yennefer, a dark figure against a gray world, like a statue carved from nightstone, enduring the test of time and elements. She waits without impatience, without haste, without the slightest sign of concern, just waits. And in this silence, in this waiting, there is more tension, more meaning, more drama than in any loud cry or lavish, verbose speech. Because it is here, in this silent arrival on the island of mists, that the true story begins. A story that will determine the fates of many. And we, together, have become witnesses to its most mysterious, most captivating, most quiet beginning. If you found yourself drawn into this world of mystery, remember to like this video, subscribe for more epic journeys, and tell us in the comments, what do you think awaits Yennefer on this silent island? Ever imagine finding yourself somewhere so utterly alien, so breathtakingly beautiful, yet so utterly wrong? Like, what if breathing itself was a melody? Or flowers actually glowed from the inside out? That's kind of what it was like for Ciri, the white flame, a child of the elder blood, when she found herself forcibly held in a place that was both captivating and incredibly strange. This isn't just some captivity story. It's about a quiet exploration, trying to understand a world that just didn't want to be understood, all while taking these silent strolls through the unbelievable gardens of Tir Nalia, a city that felt like it was carved right out of a dream. Ciri, you see, definitely didn't choose to be there. Every single stone in that city, every weird twisting plant, screamed the massive divide between her world and this one. Yet, even as a prisoner, her wild spirit was always looking for answers. Not with words, no, but just by watching. She wandered those gardens in Tir Nalia, not like someone locked away, but like a silent explorer, almost an anthropologist trying to figure out the language of a completely different civilization. The first thing that really hit her was the greenery. But listen, it wasn't the kind of green she knew. Here, plants didn't just grow. They pretty much lived on light. The leaves on so many trees and bushes just shimmered with this soft, internal glow, almost as if each leaf was a tiny little window into another dimension. Some of them shone blue, others a gentle violet, and in some spots you'd see golden hues flickering, like filtered rays from some alien sun. Under her feet, the moss stretched out, almost imperceptibly pulsing with this faint, steady rhythm, like a living tapestry. She'd reach out, touch it with her fingertips, and feel this coolness, a strange softness, totally unlike anything from her own world. And the shapes of the plants? Totally alien, too. Instead of those familiar round crowns and broad leaves, here it was all sharp angles, spirals, and fractal patterns. Tree trunks twisted like frozen whirlpools, and the flowers bloomed with this almost crystalline symmetry, their petals looking like they were carved from precious stones rather than actual living tissue. Some of them gave off this faint but astonishingly complex smell, nothing like her native forests. It was like ozone, something metallic and sweet all at once, as if the flower was both a living thing and somehow part of some intricate machine. Oh, and the sounds. Man, those sounds. They were just everywhere in the city, forming this constant backdrop, but they never felt annoying or intrusive. This wasn't the chirping of birds or the rustling leaves that Ciri was used to. No, this was a complex, multi-layered melody. Sometimes she'd hear this low, deep hum, almost like a distant horn, but without the harshness. More like an echo of eternal movement coming from somewhere deep underground. Then, these thin, tinkling chimes would drift by, like countless crystal bells hanging from invisible branches. The very air itself seemed to just vibrate with this alien symphony. There were also sounds she couldn't even begin to classify. Soft clicks, like buds opening, or long, drawn-out notes that seemed to just emanate from the very buildings themselves. She'd often just stop, close her eyes, and simply listen, trying to figure out patterns, to understand what was a natural sound and what was part of the Aen Elle culture. These sounds were like the music of an alien race, their actual language, and she could only hear it, but never quite comprehend it. The gardens of Tir Nalia weren't just nature, though. They were an extension of the architecture, part of this huge, organic design. Paths of perfectly polished black stone snaked through the glowing plants, leading to pools of opaque, shimmering liquid that didn't even reflect the sky, but instead glowed from within, like they held captured stars. Bridges, curved with an elegance that seemed impossible for stone, stretched over these water features. And above it all, towers rose, their spires reaching for the perpetually twilight sky, their surfaces etched with runes that also flickered with a faint light. Ciri would spend hours just gazing at these spires, trying to imagine what was inside, what mysteries they held. She didn't really talk to anyone. Not that she couldn't, but her words would have felt so empty in this world of silent grandeur. What could she possibly say to these ancient elves, whose faces were like masks of detachment and whose eyes were just bottomless wells of alien wisdom? She just felt like an uninvited guest, an intruder whose presence was tolerated, sure, but definitely not welcome. So, she chose silence, letting this world speak to her without words, just through its images, sounds, and sensations. Each day was a brand new discovery. One time, she found a grove of trees whose trunks were woven into these intricate arches, forming a living tunnel. Inside, it was even darker than outside, and the air was thick with a scent like sandalwood, but with weird metallic undertones. Everywhere on the branches hung these dangling formations that looked like enormous, glowing cocoons, with something faintly pulsing inside them. She cautiously approached one, stretched out her hand, but didn't quite touch it, afraid to disturb whatever fragile existence was within. What were these? Sleeping creatures? Fruits? Or just something that had absolutely no parallel in her own world? Answers never came, only more questions. Another time, something else caught her eye. A section of the garden where the plants were unusually tall, almost reaching the lowest ledges of the towers. Here, the light was incredibly intense, and the air felt denser, charged with electricity. The flowers were enormous, their petals slowly unfurling and closing with a barely audible rustle, revealing intricate patterns of shimmering threads inside. Some of them even released tiny glowing particles into the air, like pollen, which slowly floated upwards, disappearing into the twilight sky. Ciri just stood there, motionless, watching this mesmerizing dance of light and color, feeling like she was part of something so much grander than herself. She often found these secluded little nooks where she could just sit on the cold stone, leaning against the glowing moss, and just watch. Watch how the light shifted on the building's surfaces, how shadows lengthened and distorted as some alien wind swept through. Watch the barely perceptible movements of strange creatures that sometimes flew overhead, leaving a trail of shimmering dust behind them. These moments of quiet contemplation were, for her, both a form of meditation and actual survival. They let her just disconnect from her pain, despair, and loneliness, if only for a short while, and truly immerse herself in this absolute alienness that paradoxically brought her some kind of peace. Trying to understand this world was a constant, almost unnoticeable process. She noticed that some plants seemed to react to her presence, subtly changing color or the intensity of their glow as she walked by. Was it just a coincidence? Or were they truly alive in a way she couldn't even imagine? She tried to memorize the arrangement of the stars, though here they were different, their constellations completely unfamiliar, and the sky itself often hidden behind clouds or a constant haze. She listened to the city's rhythm, trying to catch its pulse, to feel how it lived, how it breathed. Sometimes, wandering through the gardens, Ciri would stumble upon small, secluded structures, maybe pavilions, maybe sanctuaries, built from the same black, perfectly smooth stone. Inside, mysterious symbols were often carved or inlaid, glowing faintly, and from them radiated this subtle sense of ancient magic. She never ventured too deep inside, feeling it was the private space of the Aen Elle, but she would peer in, just soaking in the atmosphere, trying to unravel their mysteries. Were these places for meditation or worship, or simply quiet corners for solitude, where the elves could contemplate their own equally mysterious worlds? She constantly had to remind herself that this was not her home, and that despite all its beauty, this world was her prison. But that didn't stop her curiosity, didn't dampen her thirst for knowledge. She studied the shapes of the clouds, if they were even visible, trying to understand this world's meteorology. She observed the strange insects that sometimes flew past, their wings shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow. their bodies like miniature jewels. Each such observation was a tiny victory, a small piece of information she added to her growing mosaic of understanding. Evenings in Tir Nalia were especially surreal. As full darkness fell, which was never truly absolute because of the constant glow from the plants and architecture, the city just came alive with a whole new kind of energy. The plants' luminescence grew brighter. Some even seemed to pulse more intensely. The musical sounds amplified, becoming more complex, as if an invisible orchestra was just beginning its grand concert. In the distance, high above the tower spires, faint, fast-moving lights sometimes swept by, leaving a short, shimmering trail. Were these the city's inhabitants, flying in their vehicles, or using some other form of locomotion? Ciri didn't know, but the sight was absolutely mesmerizing. She walked through the night gardens like a ghost, her figure barely visible in this world of light and shadow. Her steps were noiseless, so as not to disturb the surrounding quiet, not to scare away the unknown that might be hidden deep within the glowing thickets. This was a time when she felt most alone, yet also most free, as much as was possible in her situation. No one watched her. No one pursued her. Just her and this alien, beautiful world, silently communicating through the language of perception. Even the air here was different. It was cool, fresh, but with a constant hint of something mineral, almost metallic, as if Tir Nalia wasn't just a city, but a gigantic breathing organism made up of living stone and glowing flesh. She felt this air fill her lungs, permeate every single cell of her body, and each time it was a reminder that she was here, in an alien world, so incredibly different from her own wild, harsh, and beloved home. These silent strolls through the gardens of Tir Nalia weren't just a way for Ciri to pass the time, you know? They were a fundamental act of self-preservation, a way to actually maintain her sanity in conditions where her freedom had been stolen. It was her way of connecting with a world that sought to consume her, but couldn't quite break her spirit. In every glowing flower, every shimmering leaf, every strange melody, she found something that told her, "You are here, you are alive, and you can understand, even if that understanding comes without words." She learned to see not just plants, but complex ecosystems interacting in ways completely incomprehensible to an earthly mind. She learned to hear not just noises, but a symphony of life, unique to this dimension. She learned to feel not just alien air, but the very pulse of an alien planet. These gardens were like a textbook for her, written in light, sound, and scent. And even though she couldn't read its words, she could totally feel its meaning. Sometimes her thoughts would go back to Geralt, to Yennefer, to Vesemir, to her own world. The contrast was so stark, it almost caused physical pain. The harsh forests, the cold mountains, the familiar smells of campfire and wet earth. All of it was so incredibly far from here. But even in these moments of longing, she kept observing, kept absorbing, because she knew. Every piece of knowledge, every observation, every experience gained here could be the key to her survival, to her return home. It was a solitary journey, for sure, but not a meaningless one. In the quiet of these unearthly gardens, beneath the light of alien stars and amidst shimmering forms, Ciri didn't just exist. She learned. She grew. She silently, yet profoundly, absorbed the lessons of a world that was alien to her, yet perhaps taught her the most important lessons about herself and the boundless possibilities of reality. She was a guest in someone else's dream, and in that dream, she learned to dance to music that no one but her could truly hear. And these silent walks left an indelible mark on her soul, changing her forever. If you found this journey through Tir Nalia as captivating as Ciri did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating worlds, and leave a comment below sharing your favorite detail from this alien realm. Your support really helps us explore more stories like this.